Good afternoon. My name is Steve Dettelbach. I'm the U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Ohio, and I have the honor of introducing the Attorney General of the United States, Eric Holder. This is not the first time, or the second time, or the third time that I have introduced Attorney General Holder in Cleveland, Ohio, or that he has stood near to Mayor Jackson over the last years. This Attorney General has been to Cleveland before, and he has supported this city and its police force in many ways with his personal attention to the city's innovative and comprehensive anti-violence programs, with federal agents on the street working side by side with police to fight violence and gun crime, with his leadership and his physical presence in this community. But Attorney General Holder has supported these efforts with more than leadership. He has put his money where his mouth is. He has supported law enforcement efforts here in the city of Cleveland with federal resources. Under his leadership and that of Mayor Jackson, the ATF worked side by side with Cleveland police officers this summer to conduct Operation Gideon, which took some of this community's most violent armed felons and over 100 firearms possessed by them off the streets. He also came here to chair a meeting of our comprehensive anti-violence program, STANCE, hearing firsthand from individuals like the Chief of Police and youth about efforts to end the cycle of violence here. And the department, under Attorney General Holder's leadership, has provided significant funding to this community's efforts to fight crime. Attorney General Holder came here to announce his signature Defending Childhood initiative had selected Cuyahoga County as an initial site and provided since then over $2.5 million to help protect and counsel kids. So far, over 5,000 children exposed to violence. Moreover, during his administration, the city of Cleveland has been awarded over $8 million under the COPS program to hire and retain 65 Cleveland police officers. DOJ dollars also help pay for overtime for Cleveland police officers who have worked in the past 2 years on the gun violence effort we know as VGRIP. Attorney General Holder's latest mission that brings him here yet again is one that he has always been working on, but one that has taken on added meaning in the recent months. It is to improve relations between police departments and the communities that they serve, and I can think of no better person to lead us in this difficult and important undertaking. Eric Holder has spent most of his career in law enforcement, working side by side with law enforcement, but he also remains deeply rooted in the community. He understands and brings people together around the powerful and simple idea that constitutional policing and community safety are not in tension, they are mutually reinforcing ideas. It's my pleasure to introduce the Attorney General of the United States, Eric H. Holder.
Thanks, Steve. Well, good afternoon. Thank you all for being here today. I am joined by Vanita Gupta, the Assistant Attorney General for the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division, as well as obviously our great U.S. Attorney, Steve Dettelbach, the Mayor, and the Chief. It's good to have you all here as well. In recent days, millions of people throughout our nation have come together, bound by grief and bound by anguish in response to the tragic deaths of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, and Eric Garner in New York City. Now, as I announced last night, the United States Department of Justice is currently conducting an independent, thorough, fair, and expeditious federal civil rights investigation into each of these incidents. And as President Obama and I have indicated, the time has come, we think, to do even more. The tragic losses of these and far too many other Americans, including just last month the shooting death of 12-year-old Tamir Rice here in Cleveland, have really raised urgent national questions. And they have sparked an important conversation about the sense of trust that must exist between law enforcement and the communities that they serve and protect. Now, earlier this week, I traveled to Atlanta to begin a series of interactions with law enforcement, civic, community, and faith leaders aimed at restoring trust, rebuilding understanding, and fostering renewed cooperation between law enforcement and community members. Today, we convene the second in that series of vital discussions with leaders here in Cleveland with the intention of building a constructive and inclusive national conversation. And we kick off this conversation, I believe, with an important announcement regarding a significant step forward in our effort to ensure the highest standards of policing and to foster broad outreach and engagement between police officials and Cleveland residents. After a thorough and independent review, The Department of Justice has completed its civil pattern of practice investigation into the Cleveland Division of Police. Now, that investigation spanned more than a year and a half, and it was launched in response to a series of troubling, high-profile use of force incidents, as well as by numerous public calls for a federal investigation by civic leaders, Congresswoman Marcia Fudge, and by Mayor Jackson. Since March of 2013, the Justice Department has closely examined nearly 600 use of force incidents that occurred between 2010 and 2013, including the incidents involving the use of lethal and less than lethal force. We have determined that there is reasonable cause to believe that the Cleveland Division of Public Police engages in a pattern and practice of using excessive force, and as a result of systemic deficiencies, including insufficient accountability, inadequate training and equipment, ineffective policies, and inadequate engagement in the community. Now, fortunately, today I can announce that the Department of Justice and the City of Cleveland have come together to set in motion a process that will remedy these issues in a comprehensive and in a court-enforceable manner. Now, under Mayor Jackson's leadership, the city has acknowledged that the department's findings that raise issues of importance to people really throughout this community. And together, we have agreed to a statement of principles that will lead to a court-enforceable consent decree, including an independent monitor who will oversee the implementation of sustainable reforms, assess compliance based on objective measures, and ensure that robust new policies and practices will result in more effective and constitutional policing. Now, we recognize, of course, that this process will be both difficult and it will be complex. It will demand engagement and input from the brave law enforcement officers who serve on the front lines, Cleveland residents, civic leaders, and other community stakeholders. It will require sustained and collaborative effort toward clear, concrete objectives to build trust, to close gaps, and to forge stronger relationships. Now, we understand that the progress we seek will not come overnight, but I'm confident that the City of Cleveland and the United States Department of Justice will move forward together as committed partners. And this joint statement of principle and the eventual consent decree provide what I believe is a solid foundation for meaningful steps forward, so that we can enable all of the residents of Cleveland to have full confidence in the courageous public servants who work every day to keep them safe, and so that we can empower these dedicated women and men in blue to address persistent challenges, to obtain the training and other resources that they need in order to do these jobs safely and effectively, and ultimately to become the outstanding world-class police force that this great city deserves. Now, this process continues today with this important announcement and with the roundtable discussion that I will convene this afternoon. All of the leaders here who will be a part of that conversation understand that accountability and legitimacy are essential for communities to trust their police departments and for there to be genuine collaboration between police and the citizens that they serve. As the brother of a retired police officer, I know in a very personal way how brave these public servants are. It is for their sake as well that we must seek to heal the breakdowns that we have seen. And although these issues are, as I said, complex and the problems long-standing, we have seen in city after city where we have engaged that meaningful change is possible. Meaningful, positive change is possible. There are real, practical, and concrete measures that can be taken to ensure not only that police services are delivered in a constitutional manner, but that we can promote public safety, officer safety, confidence and collaboration, transparency, and legitimacy. Now, as you know, earlier this week, President Obama announced a series of constructive steps to help bolster the trust in and the effectiveness of the policing of our communities. These include convening a new task force to develop ways to reduce crime while building community trust, reforming how the federal government equips local law enforcement, particularly with regard to military-style equipment, and advancing the use of body-worn cameras and promoting community policing initiatives. Now, these are, to my mind, exactly the kinds of pragmatic, and inclusive actions that will bring the right people together to engage in constructive national conversation. And they will complement the reinvigorated police reform work that the Justice Department's COPS Office, Civil Rights Division, and United States Attorney's offices throughout the nation have been leading. Over the last 5 fiscal years, our Civil Rights Division has opened more than 20 investigations in police departments across the country, more than twice as many as were opened in the previous 5 fiscal years. We are currently enforcing no fewer than 15 agreements with law enforcement agencies, including 8 consent decrees, to correct unconstitutional police practices. And we have seen many times over that this model can work. Reform is underway in New Orleans, Seattle, Albuquerque, Portland, Oregon, East Haven, Connecticut, Puerto Rico, and Warren, Ohio. We are committed to moving together. We are committed to moving forward together here in Cleveland and throughout the nation to spur renewed engagement, renewed trust, and renewed momentum to really translate coordinated action into meaningful results. Now, we have a great deal of work to do, but this announcement, I think, marks an important first step. I want to thank everyone who worked really so hard to make this announcement possible, including the dedicated men and women of the Civil Rights Division's Special Litigation Section, our great U.S. Attorney, Steve Dettelbach, and the men and women of his office, the Office of the Northern District of Ohio, and the City of Cleveland, your great mayor, Mayor Jackson, and a wonderful police chief that you have here as well. It is now my privilege to turn things over to the Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Rights Division, Vanita Gupta, who will provide additional details.
Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Attorney General Holder, for your tremendous leadership and support of the work of the Civil Rights Division over the last 6 years. And thank you, Steve, for being such a strong partner in the investigation. Throughout this investigation and beyond, the attorneys from our offices have worked side by side in our collective efforts to enforce our national civil rights laws, and we are very grateful for the partnership. I'd also like to thank you, Mayor Jackson, for joining us today and for the leadership to the city that you have provided throughout this process. We really, truly appreciate it. We know that no one knows the city better than you, and no one wants to affect positive change for the citizens of Cleveland more than you do, so thank you. I would also like to thank Chief Williams and Public Safety Director McGrath for their cooperation throughout this process and the leadership that they have provided to the Cleveland Division of Police. And finally, thank you to the hardworking team from the Civil Rights Division and the United States Attorney's Office that investigated this case. The Justice Department has worked hard over the last 18 months to complete a thorough and independent review of the Cleveland Division of Police and its use of force. When we opened this investigation in March of 2013, at the invitation of Mayor Jackson, we set out to uncover the facts and follow them wherever they might lead. I'm here to report that we have done just that. As the Attorney General and Steve have mentioned, the team has conducted an exhaustive review of the Cleveland Division of Police to determine whether a pattern or practice of excessive force exists. The investigation concluded that there is a reasonable cause to believe that the Cleveland Police engage in a pattern and practice of unreasonable force in violation of the Fourth Amendment. That pattern is manifested in a range of ways, including the unnecessary and excessive use of deadly force, including shootings and head strikes with impact weapons, the unnecessary, excessive, or retaliatory use of less lethal force, including tasers, chemical spray, and fists, excessive force against persons who are mentally ill and in crisis, including in cases where officers were called exclusively for a welfare check, and the employment of poor and dangerous tactics that placed officers in situations where avoidable force became inevitable. As part of our investigation, we also assessed the reasons why officers resort to excessive force, and our investigation revealed that the causes of these patterns or practices were systemic and resulted from organizational deficiencies. Principal among these is the Cleveland Division of Police's failure to implement effective and rigorous accountability systems. Force incidents too often are not properly reported, documented, investigated, or addressed with corrective measures. Supervisors throughout the chain of command have endorsed questionable and sometimes unlawful conduct by officers. Officers are not provided with sufficient and adequate training, policy guidance, and supervision to do their jobs safely and effectively. and community policing strategies are not yet sufficiently embedded in the division. In the course of our investigation, we also discovered that some of the division's search, seizure, and arrest practices appear to violate the Fourth Amendment, and we've asked that the division work with us to address these concerns, though they are beyond the scope of our initial investigation. We announced these findings today against the backdrop of events in Ferguson and in New York, and in the wake of a shooting here in Cleveland of a 12-year-old boy just days ago. These events have spawned a national conversation about police practices, community police trust, and public safety. While the issues confronting each community are unique and the solutions must be tailored to the problems and strengths at hand, Cleveland is not alone, as the Attorney General said, in the need to address confidence between the community and its police department. Other communities around the nation also struggle and are struggling with these issues. And nonetheless, I stand here today with great optimism and hope. Our experience around the nation shows that together we can work towards solutions and forge a constructive path. That's why I'm so pleased that the mayor is standing here today as a full partner in this effort to create real, sustainable change of the Cleveland Division of Police. The Civil Rights Division, through its work with police departments across the country, has shown that the prospect of police accountability and criminal justice reform is not merely an aspiration, but an achievable goal. Accountability requires having systems, policies, and practices in place to ensure that police departments identify problems, correct conduct, and reform procedures so that officers can serve their communities in an effective, constitutional, and legitimate manner. Doing so makes communities safer, it ensures that residents partner with police to address problems, and it thereby makes the job of delivering police services safer and easier. Over the last 6 years, the Civil Rights Division has fanned out across the nation and undertaken investigations of law enforcement in every corner of this country. And this work has resulted in landmark agreements that are changing the way police services are being delivered, reforming use of force practices, as well as racial and ethnic bias in policing around the nation. And we have found, though, that reform is always more attainable and more sustainable when we work in collaboration with police departments and with the community. These initiatives, while far from enough, provide models for going forward. Change that ensures that all people are equal before the law and that law enforcement is seen as part of, not distant from, the community they serve is possible. Public safety requires more than a reduction in crime. It is contingent on trust between law enforcement and the community and a shared sense that our criminal justice system operates fairly and legitimately. Where our investigations have revealed a pattern or practice of unconstitutional conduct, we have worked with those departments and cities to bring sustainable reform through the use of court-enforceable agreements. And we have seen that these agreements and the efforts made by the police departments work. Today, we join Mayor Jackson, the City of Cleveland, Chief Williams, and the Cleveland Division of Police to begin to work together to implement positive and permanent change. We recognize that the Cleveland Division of Police has taken already some steps to address some of the preliminary concerns that we have raised with the division throughout our investigation. The division has revised its policies, has purchased new equipment, and adopted a new community policing initiative, among other measures, and these are very promising first steps. The division we will be making yet many more changes over the next several years, but if constitutional policing is to become a core value of the division, we will need to work together. And we are looking forward to working together with city officials and community stakeholders to develop what will be a comprehensive blueprint for sustainable reform. The community's voice is going to be very critical in this process, and we look forward to engaging with as many people as we can who rely and depend on the Cleveland police officers for their safety. Before I conclude, I would like to also address and speak directly to the men and women of the Cleveland Division of Police. We thank you for your service. We know you have an enormously important and difficult job. And this investigation has revealed that you are being asked to perform that job without sufficient support, guidance, training, and supervision, and sometimes without adequate equipment. This process can give you the tools to be more effective, to partner with civilians to create public safety, to make your job safer, and to ensure that the criminal justice system is equitable and seen by all as legitimate. We look forward to partnering with you, along with the city and the many communities that make up Cleveland, to achieve these goals. Over the course of the upcoming days, weeks, and months, we will reach out to all segments of the community. We want to hear your concerns and include remedies that are going to work for Cleveland. The Department of Justice will remain engaged as long as necessary until reform is achieved and not a day more. But when we are done, it will be up to the people of Cleveland and the officers of the Cleveland Division of Police to ensure that reform is sustained. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanita, not just for being here, but for being in our community in such a substantive way in your leadership. I've been working with law enforcement for many years, and I can tell you that, like the Attorney General, I know firsthand that police officers have a very difficult and dangerous job to do. And the men and women of the Cleveland Police Department are doing the best they can to enforce the law under incredibly difficult circumstances most of the time. We should not hesitate to thank them. In fact, we owe them our thanks. But in order for this community to thrive, we must not sweep issues under the rug. And that goes especially for the most difficult issues. Because when you ignore those kind of tough questions and tough problems, they grow out of sight into crisis. And they threaten success, basic rights, and even safety. We have to address these tough questions head on. That's why last March, I stood here with then Assistant Attorney General Perez and Mayor Jackson, and then Chief McGrath, and others in this room, and announced the start of this pattern and practice investigation into whether or not the Cleveland Division of Police engages in a pattern and practice of the excessive use of force. We also commenced the investigation at the result of the request from community members, congresspeople, as the Attorney General talked about, the clergy, civil rights organizations. And it wasn't an investigation into any one or two specific incidents, but a series of incidents and conduct over time. This process, which I'm going to talk briefly about, has been a public one and a collaborative one. And Mayor Jackson's leadership and presence here is a continuation, a visible one of that fact. I am pleased, as the Attorney General noted, that this week Mayor Jackson and the department agreed to a statement of principles which, while we still have a long way to go, includes an agreement that the city and the department will negotiate a consent decree with an independent monitor. We believe that these two steps, a court-enforceable agreement for reform and outside independent oversight, are essential both to making and maintaining positive change in the department. And this morning we delivered, and will be soon made public, a 58-page letter to Mayor Jackson informing him that we have completed our investigation and, as Assistant Attorney General Gupta outlined, found that there was indeed a pattern and practice of using excessive force. We take no joy, and I take no joy in this finding, but it is supported by a significant amount of evidence and a lot of work by the team in following the facts. Over the last 20 months, a team of lawyers, both from my office and from the Civil Rights Division, along with independent police experts with decades of experience policing, have interviewed hundreds of people inside and outside the department, have reviewed thousands of pages of documents, from written policies and procedures to use of force reports, have watched videos of incidents, have established an independent email and call-in number for people to voice their concerns, have reviewed citizens' complaints, have waded through stacks of documents to determine how those complaints are being handled by the city. We have also met with countless members of the community to hear their perspectives. And I can tell you, I personally, during this investigation, have been from union halls to church halls to hear different perspectives. I have met with young activists and veteran police officers. I have flown to D.C. and I have ridden in a squad car during the night shift in the 4th District, all as part of this investigation. We have met with command staff and homeless people, business owners and union leaders, mental health caseworkers, and ordinary citizens. It's been exhaustive, it's been inclusive, and as we committed, it has been fair. The letter, which will be made public today, is also thorough and offers a great deal of detail, and Assistant Attorney General Gupta outlined much of that detail. There were some themes, though. One theme was that too often officers escalated confrontations with individuals that they were interacting with instead of using accepted tactics to de-escalate some of those encounters. Another thing that our investigation did, as Assistant Attorney General Gupta said, was look not just at symptoms, but about solutions. And the investigation has never been and wasn't about playing the blame game for any individual or officer. Instead, we looked for root causes. And we believe that we identified some structural deficiencies, and it's those root causes, those deficiencies, that we pledge to work side by side with the leadership of the Cleveland Division of Police and the city collaboratively to remedy. Most significantly, there needs to be, our finding letter says, better accountability in general, and for the unreasonable use of force in particular at the CDP. We found, frankly, that sometimes a rubber stamp mentality or approach exists to these kinds of incidents of excessive force. And when accountability falters, trust also falters. Two of the more troubling parts of the finding letter are that individuals who are involved with investigating these claims, these force incidents, actually told us that sometimes they attempt to slant the way they do their reports to try and put things in a favorable light to the officer. And in addition, more than one individual responsible for investigating these kinds of incidents said that they were using a beyond a reasonable doubt standard in their administrative use of force investigations. And that is, of course, not a proper standard for an administrative or disciplinary process. We need to work cooperatively with the mayor and the police department and the officers and community leaders to reestablish mutual trust and a system that is both fair to the officers and gives them their due process, which they are entitled to, but also holds them accountable for their actions. That way, trust can run as it must in both directions, and we can have a safer community. So today is a very difficult day. It is difficult for me personally, and I suspect that it is difficult for many of the men and women of the Cleveland Division of Police. But when we take these jobs, all of us together, we swear an oath. It is an oath to uphold the law and to defend the Constitution. And if we, in law enforcement, cannot apply those same principles in that oath to ourselves, even when it's hard to do, then the oath doesn't mean anything. So now we must work together to make that path, make that oath a reality, not by assessing blame, but by working together to find solutions. So now it's my privilege to introduce to you the mayor of the city of Cleveland, the Honorable Frank Jackson. Thank you, Steve.
You know, in December of 2012, I asked for review by the Department of Justice to obtain an objective, transparent, outside evaluation of the Division of Police policy and operations related to the use of force. The city entered into this Department of Justice review committed to righting any unconstitutional wrong proven to exist in the Division of Police, and today is part of that effort, and it keeps us moving in that direction. The City of Cleveland Division of Police has made progress in implementing the types of changes designed to foster the professionalism of our police force and to ensure that we provide safety on the streets of the City of Cleveland, but there's always room for improvement. Although we may have disagreed on some facts and conclusions drawn, the City of Cleveland remains committed to continue making appropriate changes to our policies, procedures, and our training that guides the use of force by the Division of Police. Now, today we have the greatest opportunity through a real partnership between the city, Department of Justice, and the community to create a template of how to do real community policing while recognizing the challenges of an urban environment. Now, we welcome the review, and we appreciate the thoroughness of that review and the document that you've given to us, and we look forward to working with you and the community as we move forward in this process. Thank you.
So now I think if there are any questions.
I've got a question for the mayor. Mayor,
Yes.
you promoted Michael McGrath to public safety director.
Right.
Obviously, a lot of this documented abuse happened under him. Do you regret that decision now, and how do you explain that decision?
I explain it by thinking he was the right person at that time, and I believe he is now, and I do not regret it.
Next.
General?
Yes.
Can I ask you a question about all of these investigations you're conducting of various police departments around the country? Has any pattern or pathology emerged from these that you think leads cops to cross the line in this day and age?
Well, I certainly wouldn't call it a pathology, but I think we certainly see patterns that have emerged through the investigations that we have done, where you see inadequate training, where you see resource deficiencies, where you see cultural problems that exist within police departments. And so I think the work that we have done is designed to deal with those kinds of issues. But there are certainly themes that you see. I mentioned a number of cities that we are working in, 20 or so where we have filed cases. All of the things that we have found, though, are correctable if there is a determination made by the political leadership, by those who lead the police force, to make those forces better, to make better the relationships between the forces and the communities that they serve, and that is certainly our hope with the effort that we're talking about here today in Cleveland.
Is it a growing problem, or are we just paying more attention to it?
I'm not sure it's a growing problem. I think that part of what we have seen is as a result of the really great work that's been done by our Civil Rights Division, first under Tom Perez, now under Vanita, the work of our United States attorneys around the country. We have placed a greater emphasis on finding these kinds of issues, working with local communities to deal with them. One of the first things I said when I came back to the Justice Department as Attorney General was that the Civil Rights Division was open for business again, and I meant that. We have devoted resources to that division and really placed an emphasis on the work of the Civil Rights Division. So I think it's probably largely a result of the great work of the men and women who have this as their primary responsibility.
Tom?
Mr. Dettelbach or Mr. Holder, the recent shooting at 12-year-old Tamir Rice, wondering, was that at all included in your analysis? And if not, how does that illustrate or reflect upon the issues in the report? What are your thoughts about that incident?
Well, so it was not included in our analysis. It's not part of our analysis here today, and our findings are not based upon it. Of course, there's an ongoing investigation into that matter as we speak, so I really don't think it's appropriate for me to comment on my personal views of that matter. Of course, we're monitoring that investigation as well, and we will see what happens. Hold on. Let's go to the back.
What will you be investigating in the Eric Holder case?
Well, I mean, as I indicated yesterday in the statement that I made, we will certainly get access to all of the materials that was done by the DA in Staten Island, but we will do an independent, thorough investigation of our own. And so we will, as we do in all of these matters, try to get as much information as we can from witnesses who were on the scene. Obviously, review the tape. There will be medical evidence, I'm sure, that we will be looking at. But it will be an exhaustive and fair investigation, and we will reach our own independent determinations as to who, if anybody, should be charged.
You and you.
It's hard to predict exactly how long it's going to take, but I think, the people in New York, the people in this nation would be well served by us doing this as quickly as we can, and that's what we have committed to doing.
Yes.
What would you say
Hold on.
to
Hold on. Next.
Mr. Holder, do you feel that perhaps with the announcement of these investigations that you might be raising expectations for people, knowing the fact that the bar is pretty high for these civil rights investigations, the Garner case and others?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to raise expectations unnecessarily, but on the other hand, I do want to assure the people of this country that we take the obligation that we have very seriously, that we investigate thoroughly, and where we can hold people accountable, we will do so. There is, as you say, Evan, a high bar that we have to meet in conducting these civil rights investigations, but our history has shown that we have met that bar in prior investigations, and if that's possible with regard to the ones that we have underway, and if that is appropriate, we'll bring charges.
Right. For here, then here.
Given your findings, and either Mr. Holder or Mayor Jackson can address this, given the findings, should the Cleveland Police Department be reviewing the Tamir Rice shooting, or should you ask an independent entity to take care of that investigation?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so there is an ongoing investigation, and I understand that we have findings here today, but I want to separate the process that I think we should respect. And look, we didn't open this investigation and result to any one case. There have been other significant cases involving use of force that have been in the public eye, and we have let the process of investigation at the local level play out first in those instances, and we're seeing that play out now currently in our community as well. And so I think that it is appropriate to allow the local investigation process to go out with us monitoring it and a commitment to review whatever is done after that and then make a determination, as the Attorney General said was done in other jurisdictions after that, as to what should happen next. So, yes.
This is a question for Mayor Jackson. You have vehemently denied that the November 29th chase and shooting represented a systemic failure in the department. And while I know that that incident was not a part of this examination, the Justice Department is now saying that there are systemic failures on a much broader scale, that the system has failed and is failing. Do you still believe that there is no systemic failure in your police department?
I will say, as it was presented then, it was presented in a way of saying there was a systemic failure, and that systemic failure resulted in the incident. And I was saying then, and I say now, that it implied that that meant that there were no rules, that there were no policies in place, and that when you review the evidence, you review the communications, there were officers who did the right thing, there were officers who did the wrong thing. We disciplined those who did the wrong thing. But there was not as if the entire system failed. There were individual decisions made by individual officers that resulted in that incident. And that's what we said then, and that's what we say now.
Do you believe that there are systemic failures?
There are problems in the division of the Cleveland Police. And this review has demonstrated some of those problems. We will enter into discussion with the Department of Justice is how we correct those problems that we agree on that are really problems. And then we'll move ahead in a consent decree and with a monitor to ensure implementation of those necessary changes.
Mr. Mayor?
All right, so let's go 1, 2, 3. So, yes.
If I could just
And then we'll get to you. We're just trying to.
Mr. Holder, could you talk to the people of Cleveland right now and what message you'd like to send to them after they're obviously hearing these terrible violations by the Cleveland Police Department?
Well, I think the reality is that there are problems in the force here that have been identified by the work that has been done by the Civil Rights Division as well as the U.S. Attorney's Office here. But I also think that the people of Cleveland should have a sense of hope that those problems, now having been identified with the commitment of the political leadership, the chief, that these problems can be rectified and that the force can be made better, and that the relationship that it has to exist between those of us in law enforcement and the communities that we serve can be made better. I mean, this is going to take time. You know, these are problems that are long in the making, and it will not be something that a month from now we'll be able to say things have changed in a fundamental way. But I would bet that at the conclusion of the consent decree period that things will have changed in a fundamental way. So I think that people should be concerned certainly about the past, focus on the present, and I think hopeful about the future.
1, 2, 3.
Attorney General, if it's determined that the Cleveland Police Department should use body cameras on all the officers, cameras on all the police cars, it's very expensive. Will the federal government, will the DOJ contribute or help pay for that cost?
We will do the best that we can. The president, in announcing those measures, I guess earlier in the week, asked Congress to help in this regard. Asked for, I guess, $263 million to buy 50,000 body cameras. And I think that that is something that ought to be seen as a bipartisan measure that this new Congress ought to be able to deal with. You know, if Washington wants to show that it can work, that's something that they need to pass. 50,000 cameras, you know, distributed around this country won't solve everything, and people should not think that, you know, the presence of a camera necessarily will mean that all the problems we are facing are going to go away. But it's an important component of a solution. And I would hope that Congress, early on, when they reconvene and reconstitute themselves, would look at that that funding request and act upon it in a favorable way.
What if Cleveland can't afford it? It's a real problem.
Well, I mean, we'll certainly, listen as part of this process, this ongoing process, to see what the resource needs are, and to the extent that we can be helpful in that regard, we'll do so. I mean, as Steve indicated in his opening remarks, we have been, I think, mindful of the resource needs that the city has had and tried to meet them in a variety of other contexts, and I think we'll continue to do that.
Take two more
Yes.
questions. Chief Williams, questions for Chief Williams. How do you feel hearing these findings? I mean, you're the chief of the police, and how do you take it to your people and implement this? How big of a challenge is it?
Well, of course, it's not easy. If you spend 20-plus years in a profession that you love, it's not easy to hear news like this. But what I want the people of this city to know is that the men and women of the division stand committed to having a better police department. We take on this challenge, and I have complete confidence that we will meet and exceed this challenge in the years to come. So the people of this city just need to know that we will work to make this police department better.
And then, last question, I think.
You had,
You want to go ahead? Go ahead.
Well, Mayor, just a question on systemic breakdown of police seems to be an understatement here when the City Hall and the police department can't even screen police applicants properly, as we've seen in the Tamir Elementary, things like that, as we've seen in the Tamir Rice case. Does the buck stop with you, or why does it happen?
well, I'm the mayor. It always stops with me, always. And so, and I don't shirk that responsibility or accountability. So it always falls with me.
Why
Always.
wasn't he screened?
Well, that is something I've had a conversation about before I came here. And once I'm fully aware of all the circumstances and what happened, then I'll answer that question. But right now, I'm not able to answer that fully.
Right, last question.
Attorney General Holder, Chief Williams, we spent time in Cincinnati after the DOJ had a collaborative there. The mayor of Cincinnati told me that what you have to be careful of in these situations is what he termed unintended consequences, meaning you have to get buy-in from the police. And he said, the police union chief told us the buy-in is the officers are safer after the reform. Is that your experience across the country, that if there is buy-in from the police, the officers and the community are both safe?
Well, I think that the point you make is a really critical one. It's one that I mentioned in my remarks. Everybody wins if these consent decrees are done in an appropriate way. Law enforcement does its job better because you have a better relationship with the community that you serve, which means more information comes your way. You're better able to solve problems. And the officers themselves, when viewed more favorably by the community, are in an environment, I think, where they are, in fact, safer. So done well, you can have a police department that's better respected and members of that force who will find their job environment much more safe. That's a very good point.
What's the time frame for getting the consent decree in place?
We will be working as expeditiously as possible to get it in place. Obviously, I think this relates back to the previous question. We are going to be consulting extensively with line officers, with the police unions, with the community, with the business community, faith community, to come together to end up with a consent decree that really does have the buy-in across all of these different communities. The Civil Rights Division and the U.S. Attorney's Office is only going to be as successful as we are going to be in Cleveland if there is all of that buy-in. It requires time. We want to be thoughtful about it, but we also don't want to take too long. So we want to do it expeditiously, and we want to end up with an effective consent decree that will be monitored, where we will have objective metrics to measure progress, to change things around, change parts of the consent decree if we realize that things aren't working the way that we originally intended. But the goal is to be as thoughtful and expeditious and inclusive in getting the buy-in as we produce the consent decree.
All right, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, appreciate that.
Mayor, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.